thought about the whole concept, and what we were doing was we were creating a commercial development, which is architecture. We had a certain amount of green space to work with, which is landscape architecture, and we wanted to put into those two disciplines a very vital third, which is the fine arts.
Roger, the Museum of Outdoor Arts began in 1981, and at that time, I'd known you for about 4 years. I'd known you 4 years, and we got married that year, which is pretty cool, the year we started the Museum of Outdoor Arts. You know, I know my dad and my mom and I get credit for starting the Museum of Outdoor Arts, and from a corporate or physical point, we were all, you know, the first officers, etc. And then, of course, my parents kind of dropped back. But you were always there really being the architect with me on the Museum of Outdoor Arts. And we'll go to the center point of Tuscany. You actually did a lot of architectural art at Tuscany. I'd say my favorite piece of architectural art at Tuscany was that screen wall.
We had two buildings. They were connected by that wall, and that wall was as tough to build as the whole building was. But the wall was 3 or 4 feet thick with openings that matched the building, and it was curved. But the outside of that building was all book-matched marble. And what that means is each piece is cut and laid so that the grains match on each edge. But the pieces of stone are fragile, and they break. You have to put them back together and put them back on the building, else it looks like the stone doesn't match.
Well, in the center of the building is a pattern that was taken from Michelangelo.
Well, I remember the story about the architect doing that one night with scissors and construction paper, but he put those two buildings in and connected them with a curve and a lot of fenestrations in it so that it all worked together. So from the floor idea, it was perfect because everything was symmetrical. So even with the curve, it was symmetrical, and the stairs, and you do feel like you're walking into a big cathedral when you walk in from the front stairs. It's from the more of the celestial, where the pathway and the sculpture out there leads you into that. It feels like a cathedral.
Perhaps what is the soul of a development is what makes it different. And in the context of the Museum of Outdoor Arts, with its special contributions in creating more than just a for-profit center, it had a non-profit appeal. And the non-profit appeal originated with artworks placed in the community in the context of architecture and landscape architecture, but also for the soul of the patrons, for those people that were going to engage the office park. Perhaps a broader consciousness does come to them that we do something different.
In another part of the museum, these lions reign.
And they're my favorites because they're so primitive looking. They're in this.
And always the visitor is part of the picture. This is a place where you are at home, and the usual rule of look but don't touch doesn't apply.
Everyone loves this place, but children especially. I think one reason they like it so much is it's a museum where they don't have to be quiet, and they don't have to honor the space in a reverent manner. They can run and play, have fun. But I'd have to say the best project that I've ever worked on with my father, John Madden, would be the Palazzo Verde building.
I utilized my daughter and her experience, and along with her family, the family of the Museum of Outdoor Arts. And Roger Leitner, who's married to my daughter, has always had a fascination with labyrinths. And so as we're working with the architects, Roger's working with me, scheming out a design that emulates the short cathedral labyrinth. And along the lines there, we had a chandelier, my wife and myself, cast in Napoleon's time. and Lonnie Hansen took that chandelier, which was from an Italian villa, and took the crystal parts and redid them into a 45-foot chandelier, which is now hanging in the atrium. And then the last piece was Todd Seiler, who's connected to the Museum of Outdoor Arts. We commissioned him to do a spectacular 60-foot mural.
I don't think anybody knows who drew it, but it's got a lot of different meanings to it. The rosettes in the center and the number of lunations on the outside that correspond to lunar cycles and that kind of stuff. This one is a exact replica of the one in Chartres, France, that dates back to the 12th century.
The Chandelier Chardin is a 38-foot spiral of glass with an antique Venetian chandelier sort of hung in the center of that spiraling cone. You know, the story and the form comes first. It usually comes in a very whole manner in my head of what's going to happen. Then I go to materials. Then I go to techniques.
That painting called Ascension that was actually inspired by a poem, William Blake's poem, the first stanzas of which you'll recognize instantly, to see a world in a grain of sand. They're made in sections over a period of a year, and I had to use a very large factory space to assemble all these pieces. Various parts are made in different ways, and they dry at different temperatures.
Well, Element House is a concept based around maybe modular housing. It's built in a factory. It's primarily made up of structurally insulated panels. So the idea is that it can handle any environment. So heat, cold, wind. It's kind of built to be indestructible. The skin of it, the outside of it, is aluminum shingling. So it almost feels like it's either reflecting or radiating the sun or the heat. But the other thing is it's completely off the grid. There's no wires or electricity running to this. It's running on solar, and it uses just a minimal amount of energy to give you this environment that we get to live in or stay in. But if you look at this piece of architecture and how it's designed and put together, I mean, it's kind of a phenomenon. I mean, there's definitely things that we have to face, and one is the heat and one is the elements. So you have the element of rain, and then you have the element of heat. And it's a good thing that we built it in this kind of really arid, radical climate, because we get to really put it through the test.
An integral part of MOA's mission and operation is that of process. And the artistic process is essential to understand, to conceptualize the outcome that you're immersing yourself in.
The technology which enabled ancient creators to express their dreams remains unchanged today and is known as the lost wax method. This means of casting molten metal gives the individual artist the capacity to produce works of art which can be as small as fine jewelry or as large as the imagination will allow.
sculpture is about space, time, and motion. If you don't have all three of those things, the sculpture gets a little boring. The three things that the whole universe does all the time, I mean, from atoms, everything is in time and space, has to have space to move. So time, space, and motion is what I've been working at most of my career. The viewer, to start visualizing as he's looking at these things that seem to want to move, he's moving his eyes through it to get it. You can't understand it as all one thing. You have to look at every little movement that it makes and all the spaces that it creates and the big space that it's moving through. We all move through that. Wind-powered motion. But if I said wind-powered motion, nobody would think about it. If I say animotive, which means wind-powered, motion by wind, kinetic, they have to think about it.
Here's another quote of yours. You said, "If I could say with words what I'm trying to say with my work, I wouldn't need to create art." Do you still really believe that?
Yes. It's doing things that I can talk about. I mean, you can make words for them, but I dare anybody to tell me exactly what they're thinking when they're looking at my work, because they haven't practiced like I have. It's that part that they can't describe in words that I am making the three-dimensional things for. They not only work against the sky and their background, but they work against each other. That's the part I have to watch for, because I can't control the sky or the background, but I can control them. So I make sure that if I've got something I want to make it look like they're opposing each other, I'll put a red on one and a green on the other. I enjoy making really high pieces because they begin to break away from the earth. I mean, they're like trees.
Even though several artists have taken a part in that Cabinet of Curiosity, and Lonnie Hands-On was the architect of the Cabinet of Curiosity, Scott Sofa is really responsible for putting all the frosting on that cabinet.
Which I hope makes my work a little bit more unique, because I like to experiment. And by experimenting, I come up with some what I call happy accidents and some wonderful, cool techniques. For the Cabinet of Curiosity's permanent installation, I was asked to create a background, and we developed a hand-painted wallpaper that was then applied to all of the exposed surfaces of wall behind the fantasy gadgets and pieces of art that the other collaborating artists had done. Some really wonderful imagery of shells and fowl and plants and botanicals and that kind of thing. The Blue Fairy cabinet is my favorite project to date because it marries my love of design and beautiful antique furniture, my enjoyment of crafting and creating and building and working with my hands, and fantasy. The fantasy plays a lot into it, and that's what comes from Cynthia.
Education as part of the Museum of Outdoor Arts is both an individual contribution to a unified front in producing collaborative pieces and installations.
Design and Build for me is an education program that gives students the opportunity to learn about the art process, and more specifically the public art process. It fills a gap that isn't really covered in the education system. So if you want to be a professional artist, you have to know what the steps are to apply for an arts commission, and what you need to do to prepare an application and things like that. Well, I think the art process is really taking an idea and figuring out how to transform it into a physical manifestation. It could be anything. I mean, working with video or paint or drawing, you still have to go through that basic process.
What qualities of the program did you think were illuminating to you? Because you'd had an extensive art education in undergrad and then had experiences after leaving college. And so what part of the program really connected with you?
It was validating the arts and in a beautiful way of then connecting students collaboratively to work on a concept, to be able to share ideas, and then follow this vision, this one vision, and making it happen. So from all the steps, from the concept to brainstorming to getting it into a maquette, a proposal, and following what a professional public artist would do. So it's real life application. So there's this job skill that's being developed, and then it was also honoring, okay, so there's that student that might have the vision but not sure how to make it happen, and then you've got that student who has that knowledge that has that idea, you know, being able to put things together, that engineer sense or architect sense, you know, of a student that then can take that vision and then know how to make it happen, and then get a team together to make it, you know, and then there's the writer of the group, there's the mathematician of the group. So bringing all these disciplines together to then create a public art piece. And then there's the trial and tribulations of, okay, there's successes and there's failures, but then having it out and it's done and it's installed, and through the ups and downs and everything, the big celebration and awe when it all comes together and it becomes reality.
You can see how that can translate in your life, even if you don't become a public artist. Right. You become an architect or a corporate citizen or a school teacher, or it translates on that collaborative work ethic.
Right.
At least that's how I'd like to believe it happens. And, you know, the first class was in 1992. So we've had an opportunity to talk to a few people, alumni, about how it's translated into their lives. And a lot of them still use those principles of what they learned at Design and Build, even if they never picked up, you know, any kind of sculpture tool or paintbrush, or they use it in other ways. How they're going to do
it affects them for the rest of their life and everything they do. Now, I can say this about Design and Build. Most of the students come and they haven't done a collaborative project. They've been in college or come out of high school, but it's always about their thing, their item that's going to be in a culminating show. So it's their thing on the wall in a culminating show. In this case, these are our things, and you're going to get a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and the cream rises to the top at the final hour when people start really demonstrating their ability to, they take ownership in this and they really go to town on it to get it done by the deadline. Amazingly enough, the photographer didn't always do the photography. I like the fact that Design and Build gave them the opportunity to plow ahead with something they've not always done, but found a niche in the daily, here we go, I didn't know I could sew. Yeah, you sew beautifully. Here's another stitch, watch this. And watch them go to town and watch them bloom in a realm they've never even seen before. That is such a huge reward for me, to watch them grow like that. And then to follow them years after, because you Facebook everybody and let me know what you're doing. And now and then, hey, look what I'm doing. Hey, look what I'm doing. And you can see the echo of Design and Build in the things they're doing.
That's lovely.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
And since you've taught so many students and you've seen all kinds of learning styles, the student that works on an independent project versus the student that's working collaboratively to build one big piece with other people, what kind of social differences are there?
People are always observing and expressing. As a leader, you have to recognize when people are absorbing it, and then you have to oftentimes give people the opportunity to reflect and then feedback. And wait, they don't have an answer immediately. There are those that always have an answer, boom, that fast. And there are some that don't, but that's their process, and it needs to be respected. And as an educator, as a leader of a group like that, you want to bring out the best in each one of these individuals, because that's what you want to work with. You really want to work with I'm putting 100% in this. You've got to nurture that out of them. You have to encourage, support, and then listen, because they'll tell you what they need. They will almost verbatim, it'll come out of their mouth, I need this or I need that. But you can hear it in their language that they use, what they need to blossom. And then it's my job as a leader to provide that opportunity for them. And in doing so, you're going to get a better product all around. I do tell every one of them at the beginning of all of them, don't hold too tightly to any idea or anything that you're doing, because it's going to be taken away from you, number one, and it's going to be manipulated thereafter. So understand that you're part of a whole, and that you can't claim, that's not my intention. It's our intention, and we need to be there when we start, not after the fact. Oh, that's what we're doing? No, we know that before we start.
Well, and then they start feeling like they're part of a community almost.
Indeed.
And they're giving and taking and helping each other, and they all want this piece to succeed. Right. So you get a higher quality piece than if just one person, an emerging artist, if they would have done it themselves.
And by letting people have that say, you're modeling what you want them to do when they're on a project by themselves. Because someone will rise up and want to do this. And I saw the students helping stand back and say, no, you go ahead and do that. That's a great idea. And encourage one another to move forward with their own vision. That's the best pieces were those.
Exhibitions are a large part of MOA's product that we bestow upon the community. And exhibitions means anything from a painting installed in one of our galleries to a piece of performance art to anything that involves the public or our visitors into the artistic process itself.
The museum we're so not thematic. It's not as if we're, a museum of science or a museum of Renaissance art. And so our range is really anything that we want it to be, which is really liberating as an institution, because from year to year you can do such different types of programming.
That's one of the reasons that I really love to work at MOA, is that it provides these life experiences that I wouldn't get anywhere else. And I think for our patrons, we bring really stellar exhibitions and events, to the community that they wouldn't experience if we weren't here.
Well, thank you for coming out and being a participant in my latest sculpture flight. This is the second series of the sculpture. Prayer flags are something that I would actually borrowed from the Tibetan monks, that they have written their messages on a flag and they would hang it in the tree and send the message through the wind. Well, with the help of the wind and the fire and the movement of the sculpture, it will be that energy that is sent off to a higher plane.
The first exhibition that Chandler Romeo worked with us on was Vernacular Landscape in 1997, and it was a two-woman show with Tracy Dean. What does the word vernacular mean to you?
When I was making buildings and structures, I was looking at vernacular architecture, which was architecture without an architect. So buildings also can be vernacular. What's built locally, what's built to function, primarily for function. That's the primary thing that you're doing when you're building in a vernacular way.
Elemental energy, earth, air, fire, water, is a site-specific land art exhibit built to interact with the sun, wind, rain, and light. All the installations exalt the sites architecturally and draw upon human connection of experience. When the art is removed, all the steel, concrete, wood, stone, and paper will be gone, yet the intent will continue to be impressed upon the site. The earth has memory. Oblique angle. When the museum originally started over 20 years ago, we had the mission of combining architecture with landscape, with the fine arts. And so architecture has always been an emphasis through our classes, through what we select visually, as well as the sculpture, how the sculpture works into a building area, the landscape area. Is it thematic? Is it responding to the line and the color and the shape? So we haven't done, as a museum, an original show for 3 or 4 years. And it made sense, since the museum has moved its headquarters to City Center Inglewood, to try to take an architectural approach with an exhibition.
One thing that I had to discover about sticks is that they have an inherent method of joining. And if you drag one through the woods, you see what I mean. It entangles with everything. And it's that simple entanglement that I've used to hold these pieces together.
It's really interesting. People have to walk up to them and they have to go inside them. There is something that absolutely calls the child in everyone to crawl inside these little huts. And they have to touch them. They have to touch the outsides of them because they can't quite believe that somebody actually wove all of those branches. They're expecting to see metal or bolts or screws.
Is it a jungle gym? Is it a phenomena? Is it somebody that intentionally made this, or did it just happen? And you know, I let the work speak for itself, because after I'm gone, there's nobody around to apologize for it or to mitigate the circumstances of it. Ultimately, things don't have to be perfect. They just have to get done, and we've done a great job here at the Museum of Outdoor Art. We've had lots of help, lots of really good help. They have a raft of people that come in and help build their shows and put up sculptures around town and do all of the roustabout work that has to be done to make things look nice.
we've done so many amazing exhibitions, and when I talk about experiences, no exhibition is the same, but a few standouts when I think of it is when we worked with Dutch artist Claudia Youngstra. As a staff, it was really amazing to have her come in with her crew. You know, we got to work with her and understand her process and her philosophy and approach to art. And for us to be able to work with her and present that to our community was just such a cool thing. And everyone loved that show. It was tactile. You could touch things and feel, you know, how soft her fibers are and all of that.
My work, I always like to look for these kind of glitches in the rules of English and language in general. So typically in English we read left to right, top to bottom, and that's the rule. But then we've got these strange words that you can read left to right, right to left. And so building off of that, I wanted to create a grid of language, or a gridded palindrome, so you can read it left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to top, kind of all directions. So it's kind of these nested letters. So the outward shell is all R's, and then the next level is all the A's, and then there's a solitary D right in the middle. Again, I look for the quirks in language, the places where language or English might not obey its own rules. So I took that and wrapped it around itself into a circular form. So there's actually only one I in the entire neon work. I know you are, but what am? And then it comes back to the first I. And I like work that puts a viewer in that space, where they take something so simple like that childhood phrase, but really have to dig into it and go, what is this about? And really think about these words in maybe a more sophisticated way.
Light defines who you are, what you look like. I'm not interested, in one sense, in what I know. I'm interested in what I don't know, and what can be discovered in the process of creating something with light, and to discover what it is that I'm really thinking or what I'm really feeling.
You know, my simple analogies are that if you like to look at it again, if it gives you pleasure, if you return to it and gives you some satisfaction of seeing the image, then it's good. If I had to summarize sculpture, I'd say that the two most active things are where it begins, where it ends. And everything, the middle part is always the narrative. And so if you don't understand the beginning, you don't understand the ending, and so you don't want to get involved in the story. In order to make a really large-scale sculpture, you've got to kind of know what you're doing before you get into it, because the mass, the material, the engineering, if you make a mistake, it compounds itself over and over again.
This is the Stairway to Heaven. Cynthia Madden of the Museum of Outdoor Arts invited me to come take a look at the staircase, and I came over and I looked at the stairs with she and Jessica, and I said, yeah, I'd like to do this staircase. I did a lot of research about Fiddler's Green, and I came to understand what the actual meaning of Fiddler's Green is. And Fiddler's Green is actually a literary reference to a place like purgatory. It's a place that after you pass away, you travel there. And in World War II, the saying would be, you know, I'll see you in Fiddler's Green. That would be on the other side. But this place, unlike some of the other legends, it had a canteen, and you know, it was music and partying, and it was a really fun place of dancing. So that would make sense why Fiddler's Green would be called, you know, a great venue for music and the arts.
Festivals have also been a grand integration of the Museum of Outdoor Arts. When I was a kid, we had the Lunch and Learn programs where we'd have jazz festivals in the park, and everyone would just bring blankets and lay out on the grass and listen to music, surrounded by this beautiful artwork.
Bring a lunch and enjoy the sounds of summer at the Museum of Outdoor Arts free summer lunchtime series. Concerts run 11:30 to 1 every Wednesday through August 16th at Sampson Park, adjacent to Fiddler's Green Amphitheater. Join us this Wednesday. Call 894-0044 for information.
We had to do a grandiose event called the Italian Festival for the International Education Institute. Huge event. I mean, we were using Tuscany Plaza, we were using the street, we were using Fiddler's Green, we were using the park, all with simultaneous performances, all had to do with Italy.
I have, throughout my professional career, focused my choreographic endeavors, and a lot of my own personal interest has been centered around what I would call ritualistic or metaphysical expressions of dance. Mark McCoyne and I began to get together and seriously think about a performance that manifested the qualities of the Balinese culture.
The performance Bali Agung starts outside and moves inside, the concept being on one level going from light to dark, because the Balinese whole cosmology and their whole lifestyle is so integrated with the ideas of the forces of light and the forces of darkness, and balancing those two.
Spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed His grace on thee.
It's time for us to take this more global, at least for us to feel more global. Where is the canvas that we can experiment more globally? And Burning Man is one of them. It's the big laboratory. It's where you can really test your ideas and your creations. And everyone said, oh, you are being far too ambitious doing this your first year. And I said, no, we've been dealing with the environment. Granted, nothing like this, but we can do it.
The topic of water had been picked by the museum as a topic that Cynthia and team wanted to develop and cultivate, and all of the media would be inside. You could create a collage of imagery onto the shell of the dome. I mean, when you get out there, you're not going to understand what it means to be in 120-degree heat during the day and 40-degree cool at night, and 100-mile-an-hour windstorms in between.
This is Eric. I got a weather report and I started telling everyone around camp, and then I got all my tools together and was on my way out here to batten everything down, and right when I walked in the door,
The moment at which the skin ripped off of the dome, I had this almost just mystical surrender experience to say, well, I mean, this is meant to be. So why fight it? Just go with it.
It looked like looked nothing like what anyone had expected it to look like. So I think that was what I liked about it. It was kind of raw.
I was standing in the dome when the skin tore off, and my my instant reaction was, oh wow. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, because that was the curveball of all curveballs. So much of the show was set up for visuals and the immersive factor.
So it's like, okay, well, now that we have a new canvas, what can we make this look like?
It was not techno. There was not high theatrics pageantry and Disney 8 high-def projectors. We were stripped to the core of something that turned out to be very primal, and I think that's kind of the nature of Burning Man, and the humbling of that journey and that experience was to finally, we were left with this kind of raw clay, and what could we pull together? Well, it was very humble.
One of my earliest childhood memories is sitting in the cab of a crane with the crane operator when they were raising the walls of the amphitheater. Before that, it was just rolling hills with a stage. Now it's a major music venue in the Denver area that seats 17,000 people, when the living wall is a blossoming wall of flowers, but it just highlights the true essence of Fiddler's Green Amphitheater and the museum's mission of making art a part of everyday life.
Zoetrope was a 10-panel, 20-foot by over 300-foot when it was completed, mural of a horse and rider acrobat that was spaced out among the panels as individual still zoetrope images.
In the last few years, Cynthia has really been interested in all kinds of sustainable projects. And of course the museum's whole mantra is to make art a part of everyday life. And I think she feels that to be a part of this new green movement and to assist the next generation, we have to activate awareness and, I don't know, just to get involved in the green community by doing it through artwork. And I think she had the vision to do that probably before I started there, and she's just kind of been sneaking it in. So I think that's how it evolved. And probably the architecture, the Element House exhibition was probably the biggest fruition of that I can think of to date.
My uncle John Leitner put a bronze statue of the little Yorkshire Terrier at the entrance, and it was a dog fountain. And through the years, at first it was just a simple park with a pond in it. As the years passed, it has become Marjorie Park, the namesake of my grandmother, after she died. And one of the most memorable projects I participated on in that park is Wiedenblume. And it was done under the lead of Marcel Kahlberer, a German artist, and it literally brought that nature aspect into the museum's process. So it was constructed of willows brought from California, and it lived there for many years and really brought many visitors and people interested in sacred geometry and the natural aspect.
Chloe is out of Ewell Marble, which is quarried in Marble, Colorado, and Madeline Weiner, who runs the symposium up there that carves, invited you and I up once one weekend. We went up to camp and thought, wow, that looks like fun, so I started carving. And I did it for quite a few years. And I had one of the pieces, I had a dog that was very close to me, a big standard poodle, and she was really tall. And she got cancer and died, and about that same time, I think it was 2007, I wanted to carve one of her, I didn't really have any pictures, but the one that I had was in my mind because I was driving a Jeep Wagoneer all the time, and she'd always be in the back seat behind the passenger with her head out the window. So I could always look over at her and see her hair blowing back and her head out the window. So I did a piece that looks like that. It's a caricature of that sight.
The very first one was Autumn in Wonderland, and that was the illustrative with lots of lighting effects and the Cheshire Cat up in the tree. I think that was my favorite one because it had a lot of surprises. My second favorite would have to be Andorra, the Enchanted Pumpkin Patch. When we first did the pumpkin houses and brought Andorra in, who I had stumbled across at an antique store on South Broadway, and I thought, Cynthia is going to think I'm crazy if I want to throw a mannequin into this.
No.
And as I was out scouring for materials, things would find me. And as they found me, they told me what they wanted to be.
I love that when it happens.
Yeah, it's great. And that also happened with the Time Machine diorama. I've been recycling a lot of the lighting over the years to use it in different ways, and then also reusing some pieces at Union Station. When Andorra was at Union Station, they really enjoyed her.
What I value the most is probably my interaction with people and the excitement that I have telling people about what MOA is and what we do and how we are kind of the best kept secret, but that won't be for long. I want you to feel my excitement so that you can go and tell your neighbor that there's a museum right down the street and they should go check it out.
This is one party that just has to turn out right.
The earliest I can remember is doing holiday installations at my mother's house, where we had Lonnie hands-on and other participating artists come and do spectacular displays from inflatables to holiday lights. And most notably, this took place during our solstice parties that stretched into Christmas, so we kept those up. Later on, we developed that to be implemented at Hudson Gardens. We did these amazing installations for 2 or 3 years under the direction of Lonnie and other artists. My favorite were the electric sheep, because they're actually mannequin sheep, if you will, with projectors built into them that would project these fractals onto other sheep. Later on, we incorporated LEDs and very kind of immersive experiences. The gypsy wagons are very notable memories for me. The holidays are a very important part of what the museum does.
As an artist-magician, Lonnie Hands-On creates light from darkness and illusion from reality. Now, in his own words, here's Lonnie Hands-On speaking about ice plus snow.
Ice and snow is a wonderful thing to look at because I have certainly grown up around a lot of ice and snow. It's something that can be very feared, but there is also something really beautiful and pure and innocent about ice and snow. I guess especially as a kid looking at the windows of frost and ice, there's something really magical about that time. The color scheme for the whole show, of course, is Aurora Borealis, or the colors of light that come through a crystal. I obviously love the subject of magical landscape. I am one of those people that truly believes that magic is, in a way, the truth and everything else in our lives is the illusion. And living in today's world, being able to create a magical landscape like Ice and Snow where people can look at beautiful things at the same time feeling safe and magical in that environment, that's a privilege to be able to do that.
Lonnie's Holiday Windows are a magical tour of bright lights, bold colors, and imaginary machines.
Last year, in 2008, the museum created Emery Gweldig's Wondrous Keep.
My intention as an artist is serious. And the whimsy and the funk is also justified and celebrated. Hopefully, depending on the audience member, they can get what they want out of it. It's the high art and low art at the same time. Whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or Diwali, there's not a culture on earth that does not have this darkness to light ritual. The celebration of hope, celebrations of the abundance because it's the end of the year. It is the solstice. Everything is dying except for the evergreen, and we bring that into the home in hopes for spring. We're getting to do some really wild light sculptures, and we're getting to really celebrate the season. And that is the kind of story and that is the kind of symbols that I hope everyone gets to embrace. I believe that there is an underlying duty or service of art, and a lot of people don't really look at art as being a duty, but I do, and my work is about the service of art. I need to position the viewer to experience a multi-dimensional, multi-sensory experience. And if they can do that, they can rise up and be inspired. And when that happens, I'm doing honest work.
Throughout my involvement in the Museum of Outdoor Arts, I have come to ardently believe in the importance of legacy. Our legacy began as an organization in 1981 when my family started the Museum of Outdoor Arts, and continues to further the mission of making art a part of everyday life. Our legacy is a collaboration of family, personalities, artists, students, administrators, and manual laborers. Everyone that has contributed to the museum as a whole over time has promoted its evolution from a family concept to a community collaboration. The array of talents and personalities that have become a part of the museum throughout the years has transpired into a promising aspect of our future as well. Legacy is integral to the museum as it moves forward and evolves into a burgeoning future in our new location at Marjorie Park and beyond. Through a sustained focus on legacy, the Museum of Outdoor Arts will continue to promote, perpetuate, and maintain the concept of making art a part of everyday life.
My little child and I.
Yeah.
It just seems like yesterday that we were down there in West Texas, and I was hunting coats, and that's coyotes the way you are. And my daughter says, "Daddy, let's get our ass out of this place and go somewhere nice." So we came up to Denver, where we learned words like ubiquity